Hello, everybody. I can see some people coming through and joining now. Welcome to our, I was about to say May because I was looking at May earlier, our March webinar, supporting neurodivergence in the workplace. Welcome to those that haven't been to one of our webinars before. My name is Carly Saw. I'm the director of Strawberry Seed, and I'm joined by Hayley Hodges, who is the director and a psychologist at Be Seen Psychology. I just want to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of all the lands on which we are all meeting from tonight and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd like to extend that to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples that are with us today. And I am going to hand straight over to Hayley and get her to start us off today. So I'll get her to share her screen and we will get started.
Wonderful. Always this technical bit.
No pressure, Hayley.
Oh, there we go. Is that a something?
That is there.
Wonderful. Love it when things work. So welcome all. Thank you for having me, Carly. It's really exciting. I love talking all things neurodivergence in general, and especially in this extra layer of just workplace accommodations and support. We've got a bit of an agenda today, just so you've got a bit of a lay of the land. We'll do an introduction and I'll introduce myself properly. I'll go through some useful definitions and terminology, talk about like what is neurodivergence, and then the big chunk of my half of the presentation will be around accommodation and support ideas, and wrapping up with removing barriers before I'll reintroduce Carly to talk to your understanding your responsibilities as employers and the frequently asked questions of HR before our little Q&A at the end. I think we're expecting a few questions, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, look, there was some great questions in the pre-registration, so I really appreciate that. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to probably go into too great a detail on some of them because obviously, as you'll learn, it is very individual to each circumstance. So we'll do as much detail as we can, but at the end, we're more than happy to hang around and answer a few questions.
Absolutely. I didn't realize there were transitions on these until just now, so that's fun. I am Hayley. I am a psychologist and director at Be Seen Psychology. I am an autistic ADHDer who was also like identified a few years ago now, and yes, exceptionally passionate about assessment, identification processes, and rethinking accommodations from that employer perspective. I think having that position of being obviously an employee previously, as well as managing quite a large team at one stage, in another role of up to like 20 or so, mostly neurodivergent staff members, to now my small little team of all NDers, which is just such fun. And to set the scene in terms of like expectations and things tonight as well, the duration, we're aiming for about a 50-minute talk with a 10-minute Q&A. You can post any questions to the chat throughout as well, and we'll answer as whatever we can during that Q&A time. These slides will be available along with the recording afterwards, and please feel free to eat, drink, move as your body needs throughout tonight as well. Like, it's a lot easier being off camera, especially, but like, yeah, please listen to what your body needs, and I will be doing the same. So to start with some useful definitions, because all of these very similar neuro words can get quite confusing. Neurodivergent is a person or a brain that operates different to the majority. So the term neurominority can also be used. So it's really talking about that one person, one type of brain, compared to neurodiversity down here, where we're looking at that natural variation of human minds. So, you know, just like we have biodiversity, right? Then neurodiverse is used to describe what is most situations. Like in a classroom, you've got a neurodiverse class because you have autistic folk, ADHDers, neurotypical people, just a range of brain neurotypes. And neurodevelopmental neurodivergence just talks to that being from birth or innate, and neurotypical being that neuromajority. The neuroaffirming language that you'll hear me use today, and that is recommended by a lot of the autistic community through lots of surveys and polls and things, is using identity first language, such as autistic, ADHD, ADHD, rather than that person first, person with autism sort of descriptor. I'll also use the words like traits or high or low support needs, probably not so much in this example, but in general, because we're really trying to move away in the affirming realm from that medicalized model of disordered dysfunction, deficits, or that like high or low, severe sort of terminology that's really, deficit based essentially. And then really talking to disability not being a bad word, and not being something to be worried about, and especially around accommodations and things as well. Just because somebody might not be seen as like or visibly disabled doesn't mean that they're not disabled, and that's not something like that we need to hide from. And yeah, moving away like some of those more historical diagnoses around Asperger's, highly sensitive person, even some of that like differently abled superpower approach that just isn't overly affirming. And I'm happy to talk to more of that in the Q&A if you want. Again, this is all very like general. There's like absolutely individual preferences. If you have a staff member who prefers to identify in a different way, then that's up to that person entirely, and you respect that person's preferences. But these are good things to learn and understand, so that generally it also creates a really safe environment for a lot of folk. You'll find that a lot of, especially masked neurodivergent people who you might not may not have diagnosed, disclosed that they're neurodivergent, are constantly on the lookout for these sorts of things as a meter of safety in an environment. And when somebody's like using old or deficit-based words and models and things generally, then it can be a really good alert to say like, this is not a safe place to disclose and to discuss, and that ultimately leads to worse and worse conditions because of burnout and so forth. Neurodiversity is a big umbrella. Lots of different conditions, diagnoses, everything like that sort of fall underneath this. Again, this is very lived experience educator has done a great job of like picking out these like DSM diagnoses, but this only accounts for like that medicalized model of neurodivergent experiences. There's like, you don't have to be formally diagnosed to be neurodivergent. And it's like really impossible for a lot of neurodivergent folk to access formal diagnosis for one reason or another. So tonight I'm going to really be focusing on autism and ADHD employees, staff members, due to my knowledge, lived experience there. But I'm really hoping that a lot of these accommodations and things that we're talking to will be relevant across staff in general. Like, I would hope that some of this starts you pondering and thinking of that, like, oh, what are other ways that this could be done? You know, for myself as a neurotypical staff member, like, why haven't I ever thought to do this or to add that? Like, because I think generally we could be just supporting ourselves and our experiences a whole lot better. I've included some just how we've pulled apart the autism and ADHD criteria for your own reading later. But I think, yeah, talking to those sort of common traits for autistic folk, ADHDers in the work setting, autistic employees can tend to have more of these sorts of traits, like deep focus, strong pattern recognition, innovative thinking, like really good policy and procedure sort of stuff, social justice, all of that, can struggle sometimes with sensory sensitivities, social expectations, unstructured tasks. ADHDers can, again, sometimes have high energy, creative problem solving, ability to hyperfocus, but may have trouble organizing and being able to direct some of that hyperfocus, time perception and task switching. And then, of course, the ADHDers who can swing across both of these, depending on the situation. This is Leon. He introduced himself before. This is our little chameleon. And so now I really want to talk to the accommodation ideas. This is the fun part, right? Like this is the starting to think, okay, what could be done? Our goal is to reduce stress and ultimately burnout while maintaining productivity and retention. And I think that's an important part that Carly will definitely be talking to as well, in that we're not just, trying to completely refigure a workplace or like make everything sort of, if I could do this work only from the beach on Fiji, well, being like that would be lovely, but we're doing like there's a lot of in between, right? That can be really, really useful and easily done as soon as you start to think about it. My most recommended first step in all accommodation support discussions at all would be to talk to your employee, staff member, whoever is asking for accommodation or who has provided a letter of diagnosis or anything like that. Please talk to your employee. The experiences that we've had where there's been miscommunication even between what the report has recommended work do and then how work has interpreted that and taken that and ran with it, can be huge. And that really, again, just creates a whole extra level of it's harder for the employer, it's harder for the employee, it's a lot of stress for everything's getting changed for something that was never meant to be. So really, really talking to them, seeing what's working, what's not, what could change, what and the whys around different things as well. Whilst also noting that both executive functioning and capacity really do fluctuate. So it's one of the hardest things, I think, for my work. So I do a lot of assessment, a lot of therapy in that sort of post-identification space. And I think some of the hardest part of understanding what supports and accommodations are figuring that out for the clients themselves, and then trying to know when and how and why that is. So it takes a lot of trialing different things, a lot of trying to figure out what's helpful at what time and trying to create that sort of a idea. So things like, just because a staff member has been able to come to lunch in the staff room one day does not mean they'll have the capacity to use social spoons to do so another day. Same with headphones, things like that. Cool, headphones are really helpful in this scenario and really not in another. Or it, the same thing might be far too overwhelming. I'm trying to think of more particular examples that make a bit more sense there. Sorry, because I'm totally aware of that. But yeah, I'm the only thing I'm really thinking of is hair. I feel like hair's a thing most people get right, that sometimes you just can wear your hair one way and it be totally fine, and then you get a bit too sweaty, or it's a bit too hot, or the wind is just like the wrong way, and then suddenly you need your hair up, and it's not like, it's distracting, it's in your face, it's whatever, like that is hard to predict at times, right? So having the option of, like, this is a metaphorical sort of, but like having the option of the hair tie when it's needed, without like fully directing when to use the hair tie, can be really helpful. So things like advocating for additional time from home, or knowing when it would be okay to have time from home, means that instead of being very prescriptive of, okay, you must be in the office these days, or you must work from home these days, like, okay, these are the times that, or meetings or things that are really important for you to attend in office. The rest of the time it can be up to you. And then that allows employees or staff members to feel more at ease of, like, okay, no, this is something that I can just, like, I'm feeling good today, want to go in, would really like to catch up with so and so about this, rather than like having to drag themselves in on days that just aren't. Does that make sense at all, Carly? I'm trying to get some feedback. Yeah. I struggle to present to no one.
No, absolutely, that does. And it's about the idea that, it's flexibility, but with boundaries. I think
Yes.
is a good way of putting it, that it's understanding where the boundaries are, and it will depend on what job you're doing to what that looks like. But, the more that you can give, and this applies to anything, any employee that you're managing, the more autonomy someone has in how things are done, the better it's going to be for them. So it's trying to be, sometimes you need to be prescriptive, but other times you don't. So it's trying to balance that.
Absolutely. And I think, again, that comes back to the why, right? If you can explain as much as possible the why behind a decision, like, that helps so much. And just understanding that, like, okay, yep, this is, even if it's like, it doesn't even have to be a good reason sometimes, just to know that that's a reason is so much easier to do than just like, like, why? Like, okay, we really need people in the office 3 days a week. Head office is really wanting to see more people in here. We're going to be doing XYZ on these days. And then whatever, like, okay, there's some whys happening there, opposed to just, 3 days in office starting next week. And you're like, what?
Giving reasons, not just because I said so.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I've broken a lot of these sorts of support accommodation sort of examples down into different areas. Please know that, this is just almost like some brainstorming options. These aren't going to work for every workplace. They're not going to work for every employee. But they're just things that I was hoping, like, get that ball rolling on the, like, okay, and then what? Like, if this, then what else could we look at? So that scheduling to start with, just, that is the 9 to 5 or whatever the hours your business is running, or the employee is rostered onto actually working. Is there any give within that? In some places, absolutely not, and that's okay. But, like, maybe there is. Maybe that becomes a morning shift, late shift, working split shifts, to allow for some of that flexibility, things like that. 9-day fortnights, all of those really, like, basic supports there too. Work sprints can also be really helpful with allowing that, like, deep work session in between, with, like, long breaks. So really getting, like, focused time on things to, and that allowing just dedicated time. rather than in those short bursts. Or maybe somebody works better in short bursts. So one of the first things we do as a psych clinic when we onboard is ask around work hours, around how clinicians best work with in terms of clients. So do you prefer to run back to back and then have a bigger lunch, or have a earlier knockoff, or anything like that? Or do you prefer to have 10-15 minutes, half an hour between clients? Do you prefer to load into the morning or in the afternoon? Do you prefer to make sure that all of your clients are on 3 days a week so that there's 2 full days off, or would you prefer to spread them over the 5? Things like that. Communication options. I was trying to fit a Leon into every type of example, and Freud Leon was my best option for communication. He looks far too intense there. Good communication of plans, it really really useful right from before orientation. So again, that if you can be providing the information, like nothing is too much. If I could have just a general run sheet of every event that I ever go to, like my life would be better. But the things like knowing what times I'm expected to be there, and then what the social norm of the time is too. So providing things like, okay, you start at 9. Most people tend to be here around 10 to and get a cuppa or something together, or they'll go up to the coffee shop, and those things that just help invite into that social norm without being directive. But yeah, rather than oh, what am I supposed to do here? Or feeling late when you've arrived and everybody's already there. Car parks, toilets, food times, what the options for storing, heating, all of that sort of stuff is. Again, if you can provide the information, do it. Explaining the why, like we've talked about, extra processing time for requests and decisions, allowing people to just take some time rather than having to give that immediate answer. Multiple feedback options. So again, a little bit more work from a management sort of side, but if you can be offering things like written audio, video feedback rather than traditional performance reviews, maybe that's really challenging. And another way might be more easily received.
I might just jump in there, Hayley, because we've got a really great tool called This Is Me, and anyone that's been to some of our webinars previously might have heard me talk about it. And it's just a getting to know you tool on how everybody likes to work and how they like to communicate. Like, what is their preference? Is it, phone? Is it, a meeting? Is it, an email? Is it, when are you stressed? And there's a whole heap of questions that it asks you to self-reflect, and then you can share it with others. And not only is it good for ND employees, it's great for everybody to understand what people's preferences are, because it can actually help you understand each other a lot better. And I know I've certainly had that discussion with people on webinars before when they've asked about neurodiversity and neurodivergence and how it can apply in some situations. So again, just asking people what their preferences are and what works best for them can be incredibly helpful for everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah, good point. That's also one of the things on orientation that I'll talk to a lot around, and even with clients, explaining my communication style, that I don't expect all of the pleasantries in an email. I use it as a to-do list. So if you want to email me with what you want me to do, that's fine. I'm not going to take any offense to that at all. If I ever appear short this opposite way back or anything, it's also probably just because I'm busy. Check in, rather than assuming those sorts of things. Yeah, just makes it so much easier, right? Meeting adjustments. So everybody loves a meeting, right? I think I have a badge that's useless meeting survivor club. But allowing maybe for some options of writing instead of attending every meeting, especially for people who need some extra processing time, or who might find it really difficult to say what they're wanting to say on the spot. Providing agendas and follow-ups for clarity as well. AI has made this so much easier from a management point of view, like the ability to like do those note-taking things and be able to provide that so much easier than like somebody actually minuting everything now is just getting better and better. Allowing employees to have cameras off in virtual meetings, again, or if not, explaining the why. Having no meeting days where there can be that deep hyper-focus sort of work without the transitions to different tasks, different things like that. The live versus asynchronous, again, yeah, being able to respond to meeting points via voice notes rather than attending live calls, and even emoji-based feedback through meetings. So we found that like just the ability to like send little emojis in the chat and stuff while people are talking rather than having to go around and say like, oh, I agree, or things like that. Setting up those expectations as well, like, you know, feel free to put your little, if it's Zoom, you know, raise your little hand if you want to jump into anything. Rethinking job roles and structures generally. So some places of work will have opportunity for role sharing or strength-based task distribution. So I know that I've worked in places where like the admin team don't all do the same admin tasks, right? So instead of splitting that role 50-50, if one employee handles the deep focus work and another does the more admin like phone reception type tasks to play to their strengths, they both get a better like balance out of that. So it might seem like one's doing different, like very different to the other, but again, if that's like working, if we've got one person who hates being on the phones but loves spreadsheets, then it's like actually less fair to make them swap around. Again, not going to be relevant in all situations and, you know, with all personality strengths things as well, but if you can, you can. Job carving and role adjustments, so adjusting those roles based on strengths. Again, if someone's excelling at problem solving but struggles with meetings, adjusting their role so that they can attend fewer meetings to contribute with written solutions. Project-based versus time-based expectations, that can be really helpful instead of tracking like the hours worked, if it's especially for people who can work really in like those sprints of, it might have taken weeks to not do and then like an hour to do. That's really hard to to pay like to work out that sort of stuff. So instead tracking that output or results of that, I guess it's, you know, coming from an allied health place, it's a lot easier because we have billable hours and KPI sort of stuff there. Job swapping, similar to the role sharing, but swapping tasks for a set of time to balance strengths and weaknesses and allow for that novelty. So an example there can be, you know, if you've got two psychologists who have their own sort of stuff, but as a project, I know a lot of clinics have expectations around like social media, like marketing, article writing, group programs, those sorts of things. Instead of making everybody do a little bit of that in their week or month or whatever, swapping that around for like, okay, Carly, you're on social media for this month, quarter, whatever. Haley, you're on this next group program. Then you'll swap next time around. You know, things like that might create a bit of novelty on top of you know, the everyday. And again, yeah, project-based employment, freelance style contracts with specific high energy or deep knowledge tasks rather than standard full-time roles. Sensory and environmental adjustments. I feel like this could absolutely go on forever as well, but some good places to start are around having some lower stimulation in workspaces. So whether that's even like remote work or allowing noise cancelling headphones where that's appropriate, dimmer lighting, or just having a space with some of that as an option. Allowing for movement breaks without the stigma that can sometimes be associated with movement. Fidget and stimming acceptance. Even just, sorry, I got really distracted by the color of the font changing. Even just having access to fidget items, sensory, like toy things. I mean, there's so many things just from Kmart and stuff now as well that it costs almost nothing and is not going to hurt anybody to have some at a, you know, in your meeting rooms, around your workspaces. Maybe there's an option for an outdoor workstation, allowing some silent hours or do not disturb time, where like emails, calls, chats, all of that can be turned off as well. So not just the no meeting days, but like no contact time, and personalized uniform exceptions. Because yeah, uniforms alone can be a huge sensory barrier.
And in my experience, a lot of uniforms that are standardized are not the most soft, accommodating materials.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So again, like, you know, talking around those different things and the whys and the how, like how that could be changed as possible. Again, you know, it's not going to be able to happen in all circumstances, but maybe there's some. Task and workflow support. So that can be really yeah, useful again from a whole team approach, right? That color-coded task assignments, so that instead of it sort of vague to-do lists, or again that communication on like, oh yeah, can you get this done soon? And it's like, okay, what is soon? Right, like Friday, like end of week is urgent, is red. Within this next month is yellow. By the end of quarter is green. You know, or whatever system works for your place of work. Automated reminders and check-ins. Again, how good is automation now? The more I can give my executive functioning to computers, I will. So yeah, scheduled send emails, using Slack, using whatever is needed there.
Just on our team alone, like, you know, you got to do timesheets every week. And there's always, you know, I just haven't a set every fortnight reminder last thing, like at 3 o'clock on a Friday, to do your timesheet that goes to everybody. It just pops up in everybody's calendar.
Yeah.
And then it's just one less thing everyone has to think about.
Yep. Just so good. So good. We have like run to enough of a consistent like hours thing in our workplace that we don't even have to do pay slips, like you know, those sorts of things. But yeah, same thing, I've got automated reminders for pay days so that I remember to pay people every fortnight.
Me too. That's how I remember to pay people.
I think it's so useful. Trello or any sort of shared task list can be, again, really helpful. I know there was some questions around technology and stuff already, so that's where I've wanted to include some of the exact things that we use, like Trello. Goblin Tools is another great one. Have you used Goblin Tools, Carly?
No, but I have heard of it.
Yeah. It's truly magic. How it can break down different tasks into smaller steps, like give you an estimate on how long things would take. It can help, like you can put in an email and it can give you a bit of a tone check, or it can formalize something for you. Yeah, very, very useful. It can even, like, if you put in ingredients, it will tell you what you can cook. So like outside of work, also very handy. And schedule send communication. So again, like telling people, or it's late, it's been a
You don't
big,
want to set an expectation that people are going to be communicating outside of office hours. So
yeah, what you said.
100%. And
Yeah.
look, I've got other things that we use. Like I use Opal, which blocks me out of my phone from 9 till 11 in deep work mode and won't let me get into anything else, because I know that that's when I work at my best. And it just, even when I pick up my phone, I can't do anything with it anyway. You know, we've got Forest that a couple of us use that is about setting times and growing your tree.
Grow a tree, yeah.
Yeah, because again, those things work for me. That gives me the dopamine hit because I grew my tree and it stops me from being interrupted. So there's a lot of great things out there.
Another thing I just thought as well, that I haven't included anywhere but can be helpful for a lot of folk is those reminders around like eating, drinking, all of that sort of stuff. Again, modeling those things that are really important for day-to-day life sustenance, because I was thinking, like, I've used a Tamagotchi before as like a water cue.
Yeah, well, there's some really good. My daughter uses a really great app, and it's about like both your wellness, but also things you need to do. And it's like you basically, yeah, you look after this little pet every time you do something. So it, you know, she's got ADHD, and it really works well for her.
I think, is that Finch?
Possibly, I'm not
Yeah.
sure what it's called, but yes, it's
Super cute, and there's just so many options out there now. Alternative workspaces and breaks. Again, those quiet recovery rooms, exercise-based breaks where people might prefer to take trampoline or yoga breaks, so they're not just taking a trampoline somewhere. Maybe, like, again, not like forcing any of this, but allowing for that to happen. You know, I've got staff members who will nap in the middle of the day, and that's fine, like, rather than a full, you know, it doesn't have to be a lunch break, like, or for it to look like that. Alternative furniture options, having a range of seating workstation options for employees to utilize or switch between. Bean bags, cushions, you know, all of that sort of stuff can be helpful. Again, not every workspace is going to have that room to have this sort of stuff in it, but having that could be something like you just even consider. Like, yeah, having options there. And then this one is going to feel like a complete contradiction to the last, in that allowance for ownership of workspaces, and reducing hot desking where possible, or minimizing frequent unknown changes. But the two sort of do fit in together to a certain extent, right? Like that known as much as possible, but still having some option within that. So like, you know, there's some beanbag seating, but you still know that like your work stuff is here, or that like, you know, Tuesdays and Fridays, this is my spot. Mondays and Wednesdays, this is my spot. Like, can really, really help just in all of the transitional times as well. Social interaction adjustments. So again, with that more of like outside of work time, or, you know, any of the social stuff through lunches and team building exercises, having some opt-in or opt-out socializing, and really like labeling what those social activities are. Are they low, medium, high interaction? So people can choose based on their energy levels. Being mindful of additional sensory and executive functioning loads that social events can bring, and aiming to minimize what can be. So, you know, you're choosing your Christmas party, trying to choose, and you've got some options, maybe looking at the ones with less crowds, or bright lighting, or noise, if that's an option. And, you know, if you're collecting money. I would just like, babies tend to be our thing, right? Like, instead of just contributing gifts to a hamper or something, if you can just give an option to contribute money, that can be a huge executive functioning load. Like, I am so willing to transfer something, but like the idea of trying to get to a shop, remember to do that, get it done, think of it, like, is just so much at times. Digital introductions before in-person meetings. So, if you're going out again, doing a Christmas party, and there's going to be people from a different team or something, like doing a bit of a, hey, this is us, this is them sort of bio beforehand. Buddy systems for workplace events, encouraging people to bring a buddy to reduce that anxiety, and just have somebody to support. And wearable visual prompts for social spoons can be really handy. I think that the Yellow Ladybugs conference maybe did this last year, around different colored like lanyards or wristbands or something like that, to show like, yep, I'm happy for people to come and chat to me, or like, oh, like,
I prefer if you didn't.
yeah, no, thank you. So, those sorts of things that can be really useful, again, for all. Yeah. Then finally, yeah, just talking and recapping through all of that is, I hope that some of that has really like started to spark some ideas and thoughts, and even, yeah, reflecting on things that would help for yourself, things that you would change, let alone for your staff. And when we're talking, about all of those barriers to accommodation and support, like, so much of this, as you can see, does not just impact neurodivergent employees, like, and it definitely doesn't harm neurotypical employees. So we should really all be aiming for this universal design approach that creates more inclusive, productive workplaces. Universal design is where we're trying to cater for as many needs or as many different options as possible. So, we could be the same way that, like, hopefully we're looking at wheelchair accessibility, things like that. Like, we should also be looking at neurodivergence in the same way.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Hayley. All right. I am going to come back in with mine and we'll keep going. So we're probably going to go over a smidge, which is fine. I don't mind. You can hang around as long as you want. If you can't stay for the end, you'll watch the recording. So just to introduce myself properly, I'm the director of Strawberry Seed. I founded it in 2013. I am also an autistic ADHDer. I was diagnosed at 49, so, quite late. But I'm also the parent of 2 ADHDs. So not surprising. And we refer to it as double neurospicy in our family. One of my girlfriends has made a cocktail that's called that, which works really well. But for us, I guess even my kids were late diagnosed. So like, there's things that I'm constantly learning new things, and I learned some stuff today that just Hayley brought up there, that things that I hadn't even thought of before. And so it's not something that you just learn once and then, that's the answer to everything. It is very much about working out what works for everybody. I'm also true crime obsessed. Anything to do with, if I wasn't on this, I would have headphones on listening to a true crime podcast right now. And I'm a very passionate Brisbane Lions supporter. This is my gorgeous team. We help businesses, small to medium businesses, with HR, from hiring to firing, right across Australia. So our clients are right across the country, and we specialise in small business, and we do a lot of work with allied health, but we work with, you name it, we work with them. So we've got clients in all different areas, and this is my gorgeous team. We have neurodivergence on our team. We have neurodivergent people. We with different things. We are several parents of neurodivergent children as well. So it's a big thing for us. So I'm going to just briefly go through understanding what your actual responsibilities are as an employer, because there are some legal responsibilities that are there. So there are laws that do cover disability within Australia. I think most people are pretty understanding of that. The Fair Work Act expressly prohibits adverse action against an employee due to a protected attribute, and that includes disability. Now, an adverse action can be anything from demotion or termination or change of hours or change of work conditions without consent or without agreement. And the Disability Discrimination Act is the federal act that covers disability. So it makes it unlawful to treat someone less favourably because of a disability, and that does include neurodivergence. And pretty much each state also has its own laws in this space as well. So the actual definition of disability under the Discrimination Act is physical, intellectual, sensory, learning, neurological and psychiatric conditions. They're either temporary or permanent, visible or invisible, and diagnosed conditions like autism, ADHD, dyslexia, Tourette's, etc., etc., etc. So we're not going to be, I'm necessarily not going to be talking about more anything specifically, but just state that anything that comes under this banner is going to be included today. And essentially the law requires that you make reasonable adjustments. So you are required under law to make reasonable adjustments to assist someone perform their job. They must be practical and effective, and I'll talk a little bit more about unjustifiable hardship in a minute, but you're not expected to solve everything perfectly. You're not expected to put in a perfect measure every time, but there is an expectation that you make a genuine effort to try and ensure that you are supporting someone to the best of your ability. And that's what we're really going to be talking about, like, a lot of the things that Hayley has mentioned, but, it's not a one size fits all approach. There's not going to be just one answer for every situation. So I decided that I was going to go through some of the most frequently asked questions that we get asked, and different scenarios that hopefully will allow us to cover off as much as we can. So the first question we get a lot is, does an employee actually have to disclose a diagnosis to us as an employer? And the answer is no, they don't. Like, there's no legal requirement for them to disclose that they've received a diagnosis. It's a choice, and they only really need to do that if they are going to request accommodations. They may not do it, they don't have to do it up front. So the employee is under no obligation to make that declaration to you before they start. I know certainly we do suggest a lot of our clients provide a disclosure form around, illnesses or injuries or anything that can, or conditions that could impede their ability to do their job. But for some people, if that doesn't impede their ability to do their job, they don't have to tell you about it. And so I have had people say, oh, but they didn't disclose this before they started. And I'm like, well, they didn't have to. Like, yes, it's ended up impeding their job, and now they are disclosing it because it is causing some issues. But, if they genuinely have worked in this industry or worked in those jobs before and have done it without having to disclose, then, they don't ever have to tell you. And most people, or not most people, sorry, I'll take that back. A lot of people, may not disclose for a number of reasons. There's many reasons that they might not feel comfortable. There is still, for some people, a stigma around it, or their fear of judgment. They might be worried about the security of their job, not being believed, or just had past negative experiences. When I do leadership training, I speak a lot about how when you're getting an employee, especially a new employee, you're inheriting every workplace and leader they've ever had. So if they've had a bad experience in the past, they may not be open to actually telling you up front. So if they do disclose to you, really what your focus should be is on support. And I know this can be a bit intimidating for someone that's particularly a neurotypical person that's never really thought about it before, and they're like, oh my God, what does this mean and what do I have to do? But I would just start with saying, hey, I'm really glad that you felt comfortable enough to tell me. Please don't ask for any detailed information. What they share with you is completely up to them, but start by just asking, is there anything that, we could be doing to try and support you, and just open that conversation. It is so much about the conversation. And the more you can build trust in a safe environment for people to have those conversations, the more likely they're going to be, one, open to telling you what things will help them, which will generally make them a more successful employee and actually mean that they're better at their job. But two, if you do have to say no to something because you can't accommodate it, they're going to also be much more trusting that you're doing it for the right reasons, and it's going to cause a lot less conflict. So really all you need to know about as an employer is what is going to impact work. So it's about how they function, not about their diagnosis. So it's focusing on what they need and what supports they need to do their job well and to the best of their ability, which again should be like that for any employee. There's going to be times in people's lives, whether it's due to illness or injury or things going on at home and personal, that they're going to need extra support to be able to work and get through the day. So it's really how we should be treating all our employees. So we often get asked, what adjustments do I have to make? Well, the question is pretty easy. Ask the employee what they need. And Hayley gave us such a list there of some great ideas, as I said, some of which I hadn't even thought of. But also recognize that for some employees, particularly those that are recently diagnosed, they may actually not know yet. They may not have worked that out. So there might be some trial and error. So, it may be that you can help them by, saying, why don't you go away and have a think about it, or have a chat to your supports about it, and then come back and we can talk about it. Or, would you be comfortable if I did some research and came back with some ideas for our industry that might work? You can offer to help, but, also accept that it might be trial and error, and it might be trying some things and seeing if they work and working together. It's not a one-off conversation. It's going to be an ongoing discussion. So, you want to look at things like when you are assessing adjustments. So, does it have the adjustment address a genuine need? So, often people have preferences versus a genuine need. And it's establishing, well, someone might say, I prefer a quiet workplace because that is their preference. That's very different to someone who has a sensory issue that actually gets caused physical distress when, there's loud noises happening all the time. So, for example, if you're getting renovations done at the office and you have someone with a sensory issue with loud noises, allowing them to work from home on those days is going to actually make their life a hell of a lot easier. So it also isn't ongoing adjustments all the time. It could just be temporary ones that for specific situations. It is a genuine question to ask, is it sustainable for the business? And we'll talk about that a little bit more. And also you need to consider the impacts on other employees, because it's fine to say, oh, we'll give all of these adjustments to one person in the office, but, you need to balance the impact on all employees at the same time. And I think Hayley sort of hit the nail on the head. It's about creating an environment that's inclusive to as many people as possible. So you do need to, whenever there's a change, there's often a reaction. Every reaction has a equal and opposite reaction. Like what will that be? And that may be, you may not realize that until after you've made the change. So it's important to be monitoring it. You should document any adjustments that are made and conversations around this, just to kind of make sure everybody's on the same page. And I definitely would recommend a personal situation plan if you've never used one before. So this is something you can use in many different situations. It's definitely appropriate here, but when someone is suffering from a mental health condition or, depression or anxiety, when somebody has an issue going on at home, maybe there's a marriage breakdown, maybe there's a physical illness in the family or something like that. So what it is about sitting down when things are actually going okay and saying, okay, what is the situation that we're dealing with at the moment? Or that, I've been diagnosed with ADHD, for example. They only have to share as much as they want to, but it's about having a discussion and documenting it so that everybody's on the same page. So, what specific supports or adjustments or strategies might help this person? What is possible from the business side of things for, to accommodate, if I think to a different example where I had an employee whose mother-in-law passed away, who provided her childcare, and there was a whole heap of stuff going on. And we sort of said, well, my first question was, what do you need? What is going to help you? Do you need to take time off, or will being at work be a good distraction from you? And, I give people those options. And sometimes it's about saying, well, okay, I understand you want to work, but maybe in this instance, we can make a few adjustments so that if you do need to just step out and it's too much, that it's not going to have as much impact on other people. So, it's about working together. It's about looking at what's possible, just not just long term, but also in the short term. having clear boundaries and expectations around those so everybody's on the same page, so you don't end up with unintended conflict because people had a different understanding of what was meant. It is about checking in and reviewing. It might be like, hey, we're going to try this for a couple of weeks and see how it goes, and let's see if it's working for both of us. Or it might be for a set period of time because somebody, someone's child's in hospital for the next 6 weeks. So you have adjustments that you make for that period of time. And it's also around confidentiality as well. And, to give you some examples of when this can be used. So say, for example, someone suffers from quite severe panic attacks. Now, the time to ask them what they need is probably not when they're in the middle of a panic attack. But if you have a personal situation plan with someone and says, hey, if I suffer from panic attacks, this is what it looks like when that happens. Here's the things you might notice. Here's what I need in that situation. So whilst, I get me into a quiet room, give me my headphones, call my husband, rather than call an ambulance because we're panicking and no one knows what's going on. And then also being clear about who you're happy with that information to be shared with and who it's relevant to be shared with, all those kind of things. I think we do it very well on physical things. Like if someone had epilepsy, we think it's really reasonable to set up a plan of, okay, well, if you have a seizure, what should we do? And I don't think this is that much different really. And it's just a way of documenting it. Now, this is also a very common question we get. What happens if I'm unable to accommodate all the adjustments that someone has requested? Now, people can request reasonable adjustments, and, it's up to you to look at them honestly and openly and really see what you can do. But sometimes there will be times that you can't necessarily accommodate exactly what they've asked for. So be open and honest, have empathy. Let them know that you are there to support them, but there may be some constraints that we need to consider, and let's talk about them. So, focus on what is a critical need versus a nice to have. So sometimes you have to balance that out. It's absolutely fine to explore alternatives. Like say to them, look, that won't work for us, but would this work? Because this would work for us. So for example, if someone's like, oh, I need a private office, you can go, well, okay, we can't necessarily offer you a private office because we just don't have that availability. However, we would be happy that, on a Wednesday afternoon when we know that the most people are in the office and it can get really noisy, for you to have one of the meeting rooms booked out that you can go work in there, or you go work from home, or would headphones be helpful, or whatever it might be. So it's about having those discussions and trying to come up with a solution. Please document it. I mean, I know in HR we say that a lot, but please document it, because honestly, at the end of the day, the burden of proof is on you as an employer to show that you've gone through the process of actually assessing and making sure, so that if you are going to need to say no to something for a legitimate business reason, then you need to show that what steps you took to actually assess that. That is going to be on you. So, you need to really make sure that you document the discussions. And you need to assess the undue hardship. So, you're expected to make these adjustments legally, but not if they cause unjustifiable hardship. So what does that mean? It means you've got to look at the cost, the size of your business, the impact on others. You can't look at any issue in isolation. And what works, if someone requests something now, I mean, working from home is a really great example of this, or someone coming back from parental leave and you being able to say, yeah, we can accommodate you working 3 days a week, that works, does not mean in 12 months time when someone else asks for the same thing, your team makeup is completely different. There's a different staffing level. You may not be able to say yes to the same things. So it's in each situation looking at it and seeing what is doable and what isn't. The larger your business, the more likely you're going to be expected to kind of make those accommodations and maybe spend a bit more on accommodations. But it's about making sure that you actually assessed it and didn't just assume that it was going to be inconvenient. And sometimes that's as easy as going, let's try it for 2 weeks and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, if you're able to say, well, here's the reason it didn't work and here's the reason why we have to change it. So you can give more certainty to people then too. But please don't just assume it's going to be a no, because you don't want to, because that is not going to tick a box when it comes to your legal requirements. This is one I've had a few times in the last couple of months. My employee's struggling to cope and has requested accommodations that will result in a financial loss for us. What can I do? So this might be where someone says, well, I can only work so many hours a week or so many hours a day, or I want to reduce my client load, or I want to reduce my KPIs. So start by actually just thanking them for and acknowledge that, like, I appreciate that you trusted me to have this conversation, because again, you've got to keep the communication channels open. Make sure you do understand fully what they're asking, because you might have to ask some clarifying questions to really get to the root of what the issue is. So, before you can understand, okay, it might sound unmanageable when they say it, but if you can go, well, okay, can you help me understand, like, what is specifically about what's happening currently that's not working for you? What are you finding challenging? Is it particular times of the day, or is it particular tasks, or, rather than just going, well, you've asked for this, it's a yes or no, because there might be alternatives that come about and meet in the middle somewhere. So, asking something like, what would make reducing the number of clients you're seeing more manageable for you? Like, what is it about that you think is going to provide a solution? Because there might be other ways of doing that. You have to explore alternatives. You can't just, go, oh, it's a yes or no. Like, well, is there a middle ground? Is there something that might work better for us and better for you? So if someone says, well, I need, it may not be reasonable if someone says I can only work 2 hours every day, because, you need to assess the impact on the business and the constraints. And what isn't reasonable is for a business to run at a loss to employ you simply to provide you with accommodations. So it's about kind of working out what the real issues are, what are the alternatives. Let's talk about them together and really explore them before we make any final decisions. But be transparent and respectful if it is a financial issue. The example I have here is, I want to support you as best I can, but also must consider what's sustainable for the business. You only seeing 10 clients a week instead of 20 is not going to cover your wage, and I don't have other work that I can give you in that time. So, if you've reduced your hours so that you only did 10 clients a week, and you only work part-time, then that might be sustainable for us. But it's unrealistic for someone to expect that their job, get paid as a full-time worker and don't work as a full-time worker. So it's about finding that middle ground and making sure that you do look at all the options, and involve outside supports. Like, you're not expected to know everything, and that's okay if you're not sure. Ask them if they're happy for you to liaise with their GP or their other professionals and write a letter, not to get more information about things you don't need, but for you to be able to say, here's all the information about the job that we have. Can you make suggestions? If you've got ideas and suggestions that you can make that might be helpful for us, so we can, and in some instances that can be incredibly helpful, because, particularly when there's a situation where you may not be able to accommodate what they're telling you they need, you want to be relying on medical information at that point to assess whether or not that's a possibility. Because if a doctor is saying to you, or a psychiatrist or someone is saying to you, well, no, this person can only do 2 hours a day and see 2 clients, and that's kind of confirmed, then, if you have to say, well, that's not financially sustainable to us, you're not basing it on anything other than fact and the information you've been provided. So it's really important that you try and, eliminate all options before you say no. I mentioned doing a trial period, like, see if something's viable. Sometimes that you might be able to sustain a short-term change for a week or two to kind of allow someone to, recover from a bit of burnout or something. But you really need to be looking at long-term solutions. So you might say, look, let's trial reducing your caseload, or let's trial reducing your hours for a week or two and see how that works before we make any final decisions. You might say to someone, look, if you need to take a couple of weeks off, we completely get that. Let's have you take it off so that you can have that break, and then let's see and try some things when you come back. But, again, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. And look, if there is no solution that can be found, and you might have to go through a formal review process. And by that, I mean that you might need to really sit down and go, okay, what is the role? What are the inherent requirements? Can this person meet the inherent requirements for these jobs? Because sometimes, someone's ability to perform or their capability, as Hayley mentioned, can change over time. Like, it can fluctuate. And, whilst they might have been in a great place when they first started with you, there might have been multiple things that happen outside of work that have now impacted that. And so, once you have all the information, unfortunately, sometimes the answer may be, this is just not the right fit for this person. So, but that's a last possible step that you're taking. Another question we get is, I've made a lot of accommodations, I've been working with this person, but they're still underperforming. Like, it's not helping. Like, what can I do? Well, again, you've got to come back to what's the role. Are you really clear on what the role is? Are you clear that you've been clear on what the role is to the person, and what the essential parts of the role are and how they're performing in those? What have you tried so far? Like, have you put the adjustments in, but are they working? Have you checked to see if they're working? Have you checked to see that the employee has actually implemented those things? Because I did have one recently come up where they had talked about a number of adjustments and supports, but the employee actually wasn't implementing several of them. So it is a two-way street. Like, it's both parties have got to participate, but if they have been implemented effectively, like, have they worked? If they haven't, why haven't they worked? Like, what's the barrier there? So you want to go through all of those things first. Then you need to ask the question, are the issues that they're demonstrating on their performance actually related to their disability? Because sometimes it might not have anything to do with the fact that they're neurodivergent. It might have to do with the fact that they haven't got the right skills, they're not motivated. We may or may not have had a conversation with someone, this week when we said, like, just because you're neurodivergent doesn't mean you can't be an asshole. And, it doesn't mean you can't, not perform in your job through choice. So it's about not just, actually looking at it and going, is this issue got anything to do with the fact that this person needs extra supports or what their disability is? And that's no different to a physical disability. Like, it's exactly the same thing. It's like, well, make sure you're actually dealing with the right thing. So you need to have a bit of a check-in conversation first, and really this is probably the turning point if someone is not performing and you've been doing all the right things, that you're kind of transitioning from providing support to holding someone accountable, but with support. So you're kind of saying, okay, we've made adjustments, we're still experiencing these issues, like, let's talk about what that means, and like, can we do anything else, or have we done everything we can? And it's not, regardless of who you're dealing with a performance issue, once adults have been told what the expectations are and all those sort of things, and you've taken into consideration all the circumstances, if they're unable to meet the performance needs of the job, it may mean that they're either incapable of doing so or that they're choosing not to. So again, this is when you might have to start getting into a more formal performance management process, and you might have to start to document things. But no different to any other process. You outline the concerns, you reset expectations, you offer support, but with clarity on what's required. And particularly with someone who may need very clear structured, instructions, make sure you've done everything you can to support them, and it's not something that you're doing that's causing the issue. And then, that's performance, but then if it's a behavioural issue, you've got to make sure that you're providing a psychologically safe work environment for everybody. And that's every employee there. So if you've already been, you've got someone who's maybe using a tone that can be really misconstrued. They're very direct, they're very fixed in what they do. Maybe that someone is saying some inappropriate things at inappropriate times, and you've been really supporting them and giving them feedback and reasonable support, but their behaviour continues, and it's being perceived by others in a way that is causing them discomfort. It's causing them to not want to approach this person. It's giving them an uncomfortable work environment, or in some instances can be seen as bullying. You need to deal with it, not because they're neurodivergent, but because their behaviour is negatively impacting the team. And that's the same for anybody. You always take into some consideration someone's personal circumstances, but that doesn't mean that, that they don't have to have feedback on what their behaviour is doing. So just because you want to really separate that intent from the impact, because, like any type of harassment or anything like this, it's not how it's intended, it's how it's taken. So whilst the employee may not intend any harm, if the impact of their behaviour is making other people feel uncomfortable or targeted or unsafe, then it needs to be dealt with. So, saying things like, I understand that you may not mean to upset others, but the behaviour that you're displaying is really impacting on your colleague, and that's what we want to address, that behaviour and the impact. So it's reframing around behaviour, not the diagnosis. So it's not saying, oh, well, because you have autism, you do this and this and this. It's about saying these specific behaviours that you are showing in the workplace are not aligned with what were our expectations around conduct. So, yes, I understand you have a very direct personal style or preference for communicating, but, our expectation is we want to have an environment where people feel respected and don't feel like they're being, belittled or spoken to aggressively or things like that. So, we need to manage that, and we need to give the feedback and give the person the opportunity and support to fix it. Another great one is, I think my employee's neurodivergent, but they haven't disclosed. Can I just ask them? No, please don't. Even if you're a psychologist, please don't, unless they're your patient and they specifically ask you for that advice, because, it is up to them, and you actually can't, it can actually be seen as discrimination if you do. So yes, you might have some inclinations, particularly if you're familiar in that space with, with the more familiar you get with neurodiversity, the more likely you'll likely go, I can see some traits there. But don't make assumptions or label behavior as a disorder or a condition. That's not your job to do that. And don't treat them differently unless they've explicitly asked you for support. What you want to do is focus on the behavior again and the impact, not the cause. So focus on the observable behaviors and the impact on others. So you might say, look, I've noticed recently that you've been really withdrawn, or you've noted, is there anything that I can help with? Is there anything I can support you with? We want to create an environment where people do feel safe to come forward, but if they don't, even if they are neurodivergent, they don't want to disclose it, you can still provide that support. You can still say, like, is there anything I can do to help you? No, you can always come to me, and sort of open that door. Just because someone hasn't got a diagnosis doesn't mean you can't offer support. So, is there anything that would help? Is there anything that would make the work environment better for you or easier for you? Or, they're discussions you can have with any employee at any time. And, make sure that if you do have any ongoing concerns with performance or behavioural issues, like, if you should be addressing them for any employee. And, that's regardless of whether someone has a diagnosis or doesn't have a diagnosis. So, as long as you're like addressing this, like you're fair and equal in how you address those behaviours, and you do take into consideration circumstances, then, absolutely you should be dealing with that. And just ask for help. Like, don't try and do it yourself. You're not expected to be an expert on any of these things. And even us experts are always, learning all the time. So we've actually, one of my team, Chloe, who is a parent of 3 ND kids, she has been putting together a range of fact sheets and resources that we're going to we're happy to share with anybody. We've got ones on, what to do if someone does disclose to you, what to do if you suspect somebody, how can you accommodate someone who's a carer for someone who's ND, and then how to accommodate in the workplace about 17 different forms of neurodivergent conditions, so that there's tips and hints and ideas on actually what you can put in place and all those kind of things. Jen, I did see you raise your hand. We will answer that question in a second, I promise you. So yeah, we're more than happy to share those with people. And I just want you to think about the fact it's not about treating everyone the same. It's about giving everyone what they need to succeed. And that applies to any employee. But it is especially important to do when you've got people who are, maybe need some slightly different things that are going to make them successful in the workplace. We do have a couple of upcoming webinars. Our May one, we're going to skip April. It's too hard with Easter and everything in it. On sexual harassment, we always do one on awards, and we always onboard. We're also doing one on onboarding employees and setting that foundation in July. We have some leadership training. We have our public workshop coming up in Brisbane at the end of May. So those tickets are on sale and they're already starting to go. And so they're early bird prices right now. But we want to open it up to questions. And I did see that someone raised their hand. The person that raised their hand, do you want to put a question in the Q&A or in the chat? We'd be more than happy for you to ask a question. Whoops, hang on, it's over here. Q&A. Oh, now go on. Yeah, just keen to support our ND team of 6 by creating open dialogue around accommodation. Your tip sheets will be valuable. Thank you. Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Jen. Like it's about just people learning, and it's about finding information out, and but talking to your employees. I mean, I don't know if Hayley and I can say that enough times, but also like getting that they may not always have an answer. Yeah, is there any other questions? I was expecting a few more questions actually. Normally I get a lot when I figured this one would have lots of more specific questions. Both Hayley at Be Seen and ourselves have our social media, and we're often sharing different bits and pieces. we will be sending out a copy of this. We'll be sending out the recording as well. All of our contact details are there if you want to get in touch with either of us after this. But yeah, is there any other questions anyone wants to throw in there right now? We'd be more than happy to answer them. We know we went a bit over. I knew it was going to happen. When you get onto a topic like this, it's just too easy to talk about things. Oop, Jen raised her hand.
I also should have mentioned job access. Do you know much about job access, Carly?
No, I don't, but I'm going to let Jen speak if she wants to. She raised her hand.
Oh, baby. Thank you.
That's okay.
We are a proud neurodivergent team. We've got about 6 people in the office. Shared space. We've introduced visual barriers, which has really helped our teammates focus during their focus time. But it's open enough that we have the opportunity to collaborate as well. Some of our teammates experience sensory understimulation. So they're sensory seekers. So they might have a loud keyboard, or they might want to debrief really quickly after a phone call or multiple phone calls across the day. I wonder if you could touch on some of the accommodations that could be useful for sensory stimulation seeking employees without I wonder if I'm coming across clearly or trying to put too much information in without adversely affecting the sensory avoidant people in our team.
Yeah. That's a really good question. Do you have enough seekers on the team to like buddy up?
Talk to me more about buddy.
I know that I'd have certain people that were very much the verbal debriefy type people that I can go to get that like immediate chat sort of stuff, and that's not always going to be like some of my colleagues. So like whether you can buddy that up in that sort of way, or even do like a roster sort of system of again, just around clarity of hey employee, I know that you really like to talk through these things, know that I'm available on Mondays, Wednesdays, so and so's available Tuesdays, Thursdays, whatever that looks like, to be your bounce off. If that
that's a great idea.
Would that help at all? Or
I think it's a great idea that we need to consider. And that's exactly why I'm asking the question. We want our neurodivergent employees to be supported in a meaningful way. But I suppose on the flip side, we don't want that support to adversely affect others in the team or present distraction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it can be tricky to balance, especially I'm thinking like within myself, who can be both of those people at once.
Same. Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
It depends on the situation, the phone call, the setting, the who's around. Okay, so another part of the question, we have different great brain thinking, productivity time. Have you in your workplace implemented like concentration times where everybody is quiet? It's almost like I suppose if we compare it to the train, there's the quiet carriage where it's understood that no one is talking. So kind of implementing quiet carriage time in the office.
I haven't, because the last time I was in office with other people, we were all far too noisy for that to occur. Like, random quotes, random noise, things like that. We work in our telehealth space at the moment, so and my admin is my partner, so he's in the office next door, so I'll like do that sort of closed door, I'm off for a while, and I'll like alert my team to I'm unavailable for this time in that sort of respect.
Do you have, Jen, can I ask, do you have like Slack or something like that that you use?
We have been using Slack. However, we've moved away from Slack and into Google Chats.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm not familiar with Google Chats, but I certainly know we use Slack, and one of the things
Very similar to Slack.
Yeah, so one of the things that we use is we have one of our statuses is the poo emoji, and it's called getting shit done. So if someone really needs to kind of let everybody know without having to tell everybody expressly, like, hey, I'm trying to kind of really deep work at the moment, they change their status to that. And it means people aren't going to pick up the phone and call them, because my team can be in the office or work remotely. They have a choice. And so, and all of us love being in the office, but we all know if we're trying to concentrate, we don't come in the office, we work from home, but not everyone has that option. Another thing we've recently done is that I got as an idea when I was looking for something to help a client was talking about your energy levels and what you've got to give that day. Like, it doesn't have to be a conversation. Like, you can have like emojis or different statuses in your Slack or your Google Chat that says, hey, we've got some different emojis that we can change that, like, you know, if you're on fire, if you're having a really good day, it can be the fire emoji, like you're doing really well. And then, you know, we've got a low battery one. And so that people, without having to say, hey, I don't have a lot to give today, can kind of just set their status, which tells everyone, just give me a bit of space.
Yes, I love that. And it's a visual, which for our, well, I think all of us are visual thinkers, in our team anyway. It's an at a glance, you know, is this person available or not available? Is now a good time or not a good time?
100%. And another idea that you can use, which I've only recently discovered as a verbal reasoner myself. Oh, you've got the badges.
Little social battery pins.
Oh, cute.
But I'm a verbal reasoner, and I recently discovered that ChatGPT actually, that on your phone you can literally just talk into it and have a conversation with it and ask it questions and ask it to give you feedback. And you know, if you've got someone who's a verbal reasoner and they don't have someone around that they can have that conversation with, again, there's some, you know, it's an opportunity because you can actually talk back to it and it can talk to you. You can ask it questions and you can kind of debrief with it and get it to take a whole heap of notes that even you can just use later when you actually do meet with someone, or you can send to someone and ask them for feedback, but you still get that opportunity to dump it out verbally because that's your preference.
That is an incredible suggestion. So that's just through ChatGPT, or was that through the
on my
app that you guys
on the app
mentioned?
on my phone? I'm sure you can do it on the desktop as well, but I know on the app on my phone, I literally the other morning, because I have good ideas in the shower, because of course I do, and it was a Saturday morning, I just literally pressed the button on my app with my headphones on and walked around while I was doing housework, talking into it with all this stuff I wanted to get out of my head. And then I asked it, can you organize that and sort of into it some sort of reasonable format. And then when I got into work on Monday morning, it was all sitting there. So yeah, but you can have a conversation.
Yeah,
you can ask it questions and ask it what it thinks, or ask it for its opinion and ask it to reply to you. So
That's incredible. I'm just going to search up verbal, what did you call it? Verbal reasoning.
Verbal reasoning. So to me, a verbal reasoner is someone who needs to talk through something out loud to, you know,
the same sort of stuff. Yeah.
Verbal processing. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Great suggestions.
And yeah, otherwise, I would really encourage as silent as possible in that quiet carriage sort of space, and still encouraging like the noise cancelling headphones and stuff for people who need that, lots and lots of stuff. But you know, if there's random noise, or giving that you know, I'm like just imagining your have you seen Severed? Like that's what I'm imagining your office place is like now. Sorry, like a big a big room with like a kitchenette.
No, gosh, no.
I knew it wouldn't be, but like that's all I've got in my head now. So you know, like having that as an option of like, if you want to go to the kitchen and stretch, move, sing,
make it happen.
Yeah, make it happen. If somebody like then wants to follow you in for a chat, like awesome.
Yeah.
And it's just about working out and, you know, talk to your team, have a discussion, go, hey, I've got some ideas. What does everyone think of them? Like, you know, and get people's view on them. Potentially, if you've got different, like send it out to everyone beforehand and go, here are my ideas. Come with your own that you think might work. And, you know, you can only try it out. I mean, the other thing that came to mind for me was loops. I love my loops so much. And you know, my loop earbuds, which you can have all different versions that are completely noise cancelling, or they just kind of reduce the background noise. I wore mine at the Foo Fighters concert on the floor, and I was able to have a conversation with my daughter who was right there, and she's like, I cannot hear a word you're saying, but I could hear everything she was saying clearly. I could still hear the music, but it just took out the extraneous extra noise that was kind of doing my head in. So, you know, there's so many great little things out there now, and it's just a case of asking around and, you know, Googling and, you know, maybe messaging Haley or someone, you know, and just kind of asking for some suggestions and go from there. But there's some really good things out there that are helpful.
Yeah, thank you. I'll step back now to allow other questions to be asked or answered, as it were. Thank you for your insights. I appreciate it.
Right,
No problem at all, Jen. Thank you. If anyone else has got any questions, they want to pop them in the chat or raise their hand, you can jump on and ask them if you want to. More than happy to do that. Well, I'm going to assume that we don't have any more. And I know we've gone like half an hour over, which is, you know, not unusual for me, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
So look, it's been great having everyone on. Thank you so much for the great question, Jen. If you do have any other questions or, oh, go Haley.
Job access, government funded disability employment assistance fund. So it works with both, like if the employee applies, it works in with the employer as well, and they can fund some like noise cancelling headphones, different automated, like, you know, there's a certain software, things like that, anything to do with disability in the workplace that can be really useful, as well as sometimes giving a bit of a fund to the person for OT, psychology, ADHD coaching, things like that, and can provide like workplace trainings around all of this stuff too. So definitely worthwhile keeping up your sleeve.
Fantastic. What I might get you to do, Haley, if you send me some information about it or a link or whatever, I'll include that when I send out the webinar to everybody, so that we can provide that. But absolutely, you know, as you can tell, Haley and I are both quite passionate about this. And, you know, but also as business owners ourselves, we also like straddle that edge of, you know, you want to be as accommodating as possible, but you also have to do it in a way that's sustainable, or else you don't have a business and jobs in the first place. So we are both more than happy to answer any questions that you have. If you want to pop them through over email, I'm sure we'll get back to you. If you want copies of any of our fact sheets, we're happy to provide them on the different things. And I just want to thank Haley for joining me for this. Haley's one of our clients. When I went out to my team and I said, hey, is there anyone that we've got that would be great? I'm so glad that you were put forward, Haley. It's been lovely sort of working with you on this. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for your time tonight. And hopefully we'll speak to some of you soon. Have a great night.
Thanks, Kelly. Bye.
Thanks.